A tax freight train is bearing down on your retirement. To protect yourself, you'll have to harness the power of zero.
Hello and welcome to the Power of Zero show. I'm your host, best-selling author David McKnight, author of The Power of Zero, Look Before You Lerp, The Volatility Shield, and Tax-Free Income for Life, all of which can be purchased in single copies at Amazon or wherever you buy fine books, or you can buy them in bulk. You can mix and match titles to achieve bulk discounts. Just head over to davidmcknightbooks.com. If you're looking to navigate all of the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, why not head over to davidmcknight.com? We're happy to introduce you to a member of our elite POZ advisor group among the top tax-free retirement planning experts in the nation, all of which have been trained, vetted, qualified personally by me. If you are an advisor looking to level up your game and want to adopt the Power of Zero worldview in your financial planning practice, head over to powerofzero.com and opt into our free 3-part video series. And as always, would love a follow on Twitter. It's at McKnight & Co, at McKnight & Co. All right, today we are going to be talking about the possibility that Joe Biden's tax proposal has, if not stalled out, run into some headwinds. Okay, so we know that what Joe Biden campaigned on was the idea that he would be raising taxes on the top 1% of earners in America. And here we are 6 months into his administration, and he's accomplished a fair amount. He's put into place a $1.9 trillion COVID-19 rescue law. He's got a $1.2 trillion physical infrastructure plan, another $1.8 trillion that he has proposed for families, childcare, and paid worker leave programs. However, thus far, he has been unable to bring his tax proposals to fruition. I will be drawing on a CNBC article throughout the course of this podcast, and I will put the link to that article in my show notes. Now, before we get into why his tax proposal could potentially be running into some headwinds, let's review what exactly Joe Biden is proposing. Now, I want to talk about the main pillars of his tax proposal. The first of which is his desire to increase taxes on corporations. It's the domestic corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Now, it used to be 35%, so 28 is significantly better than 35. Remember that typically what corporations tend to do is they tend to pass these increased taxes onto their clients in the form of increased prices, right, onto consumers. So he's looking to raise it from 21. Remember, Trump cut it from 35 to 21. He's looking to push that back up to 28 to create more revenue. And he's also looking to raise tax rates on those who make more than $400,000 for married couples, those who make more than $200,000 for single individuals, from 37% all the way up to 39.6%. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal. The next one is a rather big deal. For those making $1 million or more, their capital gains tax rate, this is your long-term capital gains tax rates. Remember, your short-term capital gains tax rates already align with what your individual income tax rate is. But your long-term capital gains tax rates would go from 20% all the way up to 39.6%. For those of you who say that tax rates can't double, we're looking at an effective doubling of tax rates on capital gains. Okay, so this is a really big deal. Why is Joe Biden's tax proposal running out of steam, according to some sources? Number one is the GOP opposition. We know that all of the GOP resolutely are against tax increases, and a number of economists are concerned that raising taxes now could risk the economic recovery at a period in time when it needs all of the tailwinds that it can get. There's a former George W. Bush Treasury official by the name of Tony Fratto, and he seems to be in the know on this. He says that the chances of big tax reform in the near term seem reduced, and he explains why. He says, I don't want to say that the fight is over on that quite yet, because I know there are still proponents of that, but I think that they are hard fights. On the corporate side, coming out of the economic situation we've been in, you can make a case that you don't want to squelch the return to growth and job creation when there are still many millions of people out of work relative to pre-COVID-19. So in other words, there can be potentially vast economic implications of raising taxes on corporations while corporations are still trying to battle their way out of the quagmire of the COVID-19 recession. One thing that's interesting is you can actually look to major Wall Street players and sort of read the tea leaves, right? You can look at what they've said about the tax proposal and how they're preparing for it or not preparing for it to sort of get a sense for where the experts believe this thing is going to land. So let's take a look at BlackRock, one of the biggest players on Wall Street. They are mildly bullish on the tax rates going through, but only in a modest way. Any mention of raising the domestic corporate tax rate from its current 21% is a non-starter for Republicans and economists. We know that. BlackRock says it's still way too early in the economic recovery to ask the nation's businesses to send an even greater proportion of their profits to Uncle Sam. That said, senior strategists for BlackRock think that it is somewhat likely that a modest tax increase could go through. Let's see, Kurt Raymond, BlackRock's senior strategist for North America, said the direction of travel for corporate taxes, even though the outlook is uncertain, is higher. We think the Democrats are going to use this open window during the summer and fall ahead of campaigning for the midterms to advance their legislative agenda. Remember, it's very important to get these things implemented before midterms. We'll cover that here in a second. BlackRock's managers warn that if the proposed 28% corporate income tax rate and a 21% global minimum tax were imposed, the average earnings per share of companies in the S&P 500 could fall as much as 7% lower in 2022. Raymond and his colleagues believe that while it's likely Democrats will manage to move tax rates higher, the hikes will be more modest than Biden's initial proposals. They note, for example, Biden's willingness to consider a more moderate increase in the top corporate tax rate to 24% is something that's favored by key centrist Senator Joe Manchin. So they haven't really opined on what's going to happen to individual tax rates. They've opined on what's going to happen to corporate tax rates. But once again, when corporate tax rates go up, corporations tend to pass those higher taxes on to consumers. All right, so that was BlackRock. Take a listen, however, to what JP Morgan has to say. They believe that Joe Biden will not be able to deliver on his tax increase. Okay, JP Morgan's equity strategy team told clients recently, we do not believe that U.S. politics will hurt U.S. stocks in absolute terms, as it is unlikely that Biden will be able to deliver on some potentially market unfriendly proposals on taxation/tech regulation. In other words, they don't believe that there will be a negative impact on the stock market as a result of Biden being able to push through this legislation. However, they say in relative terms, though, investor sentiment might be impeded as there is a headline news flow risk with respect to some of these policies. In other words, even though they believe that Biden will not be able to push through this legislation, they do believe that all of this talk, the threat, if you will, of increased tax rates could tamp down what could otherwise be more robust market returns. What does Mitt Romney say about all of this? He says tax increases are off the table. Senator John Tester, a Montana Democrat, who is part of the negotiation, said that paying for infrastructure is probably the toughest part about this from his perspective. In other words, being able to pay for infrastructure bills with increased taxation is going to be the hardest part of being able to pull all of this off. So, given that Joe Biden's tax proposal is potentially running out of steam, Tony Fratto, this Bush-era Treasury official of whom we spoke earlier, has said that there is another way to pay for all of this increased spending that Joe Biden has proposed. He says, quote, borrowing has been cheap for a long time. It is exceedingly cheap now, and it's not clear that this is going to change. When you don't have that pressure of the ever-increasing cost of your debt, the pay-for arguments get to be really hard. What does that mean? Well, basically what he's saying, look, if the Republicans and Democrats can't agree on how to raise revenue for this bills, the best way to pay for all of this stuff that is being proposed, that we've talked about some stuff that's gone through, some stuff that has been proposed but has not yet been approved, is basically saying that because interest rates are so low, because the cost of borrowing money has been so low and is thought to continue to be low into the future, why not just borrow the money? The cost of doing so is very, very low. And of course, you got to remember how this works. These are not long-term loans that the United States get. They're short-term loans. And so every year or two, they have to refinance these loans. And so the cost of servicing all this debt ebbs and flows with interest rates. So if interest rates do go up, it's not like they're locking into a 30-year loan. It's a loan that renews every year or 2 years. And so it is impacted by interest rates. So if interest rates stay low, they can continue to pile on the debt. But what happens when interest rates go up? They're going to have to really pay the price for borrowing all that money. Now let's talk about why Joe Biden, if he's going to push his tax proposal through, he has to do it soon. We talk about the first 100 days of an administration. If you can't get stuff done in the first 100 days, it becomes increasingly difficult to do it because, you want to get stuff done so that if you can't get the votes for it, you can push stuff through budget reconciliation. That has to get done by October. But really, if you can't get stuff done in the first year, if you can't get stuff done in the first year, now all of a sudden you're looking to try to push potentially radical proposals through during an election year in the lead up to the midterm elections. And that can be really, really tough because historically, presidents lose either the House and or the Senate during the midterms. And so they become lame ducks during their third and fourth year. And so what Biden is hoping to be able to do is push all of his initiatives through in the first year, worst case scenario, second year, because he knows that he's likely, in fact, a lot of polling is pointing to this reality that Republicans could almost certainly take the House and potentially win back the Senate. Remember, they only have to win back one seat to be able to be able to regain control of the Senate. So he's got to push this stuff through pretty soon. And if he doesn't push it through pretty soon, he's probably not going to get it. And that's why people are starting to speculate that he may not get it at all, because this was something that he really campaigned on. He campaigned on building a bridge between the extremely wealthy in the country and the not so wealthy to create a broader middle class. And if he doesn't push this tax reform through, or this tax hike through is really what it amounts to, then he's not going to be able to accomplish that. Okay, so it's got to get done by the midterms. It should really get done by the end of his first year in office. If it doesn't get done by the end of his first year in office, it's probably not going to get done. So what does all of this mean for the power of zero worldview? Well, what it means is that if Joe Biden is in fact losing steam on his tax proposal, that means that it will be status quo. And what is status quo? Status quo is simply the Trump tax cuts will expire December 31st, 2025, which means that January 1st, 2026, we will revert back to what tax rates were in 2017. Okay, which means that if you are looking to reposition assets from tax deferred to tax free, you really do only have a window of 5 years. I think that as far as the power zero worldview goes, if you're looking to systematically reposition assets from tax deferred to tax free, you want to have as long a runway as possible. You don't want the 5 years, you want the 9 years, which includes 2021 through 2029. So you would only have 5 years to get it done. Now, I don't think I would throw yourself off of a tall building just yet. I think that we have until the end of the year to determine whether this is going to go through or not. So I would say keep your ear to the ground, keep your ear to this podcast. We will update you on how this ends up. If all of a sudden Joe Biden has a second wind and he's able to garner enough support in the Senate to be able to push this stuff through, I think that we could have a whole different ballgame. But my job is to sort of keep you abreast of what the situation on the ground is looking like. All right, that's the show for today. Again, if you're looking for someone to help you navigate the road to the 0% tax bracket, head on over to davidmcknight.com. We'll make an introduction to an elite Power Zero advisor in your neighborhood. And if you are an advisor who is looking to level up your game, head over to powerzero.com and take a look at our free video series. I teach you all about how to transition your practice to a power of zero style practice. Once again, would love a follow on Twitter, and please subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, and would love a fair and honest review on any of the channels where you listen to this podcast. Appreciate you being here. We look forward to chatting with you same time next week.